The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André. I am your host. Big thanks to Luke the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, general listener, for tuning in once again to the show. How are you? How are things? How's that thing? That thing? You know that thing? The one you're worried about? I'm sure it's going to be alright. Yeah, things are going well with me. I have started doing something I've never really done with this show, which is listen to it. I kind of go through the whole conversations, do some editing and whatnot to get the episodes up and running. However, I've kind of thought it's best, academically, I suppose, to learn myself what I'm doing wrong, what I'd like to see change, that sort of thing. And yeah, so I started listening into the shows. And I'm listening to the Frank Forrestal episode, part 1 right now. A little behind because of the season. But yeah, no, I really dig that interview. I think it went really well. Kind of getting used to hearing my own voice a lot, which is kind of interesting. It's funny because I do this other podcast, the X-Rated X-Men Anime Review Show. And, we're doing that one live, and I do tune into that one occasionally, watch the list of the episodes. It doesn't bother me as much. I don't know why this one, maybe it seems more personal since it's sort of an interview format, and it's a little more of all of me. Still battling this cold. That's week 3, I believe. I didn't stage that cough. It actually just, ironically, came right at that moment to further elucidate the point. It's like week 3 of this thing. I've never normally had a cold linger this long. Usually they don't last more than a few days for me. But I think it might be this, I don't know, my wife told me about this RKV something. I don't know, something with letters. That's this new thing running around. It's kind of like a chest cold that lingers for like 2 to 3 weeks. And it sucks. It really sucks. I'll be incredibly happy when this is done. Kind of holding me back from some of the things I want to do in my life. I'm not going to edit that out. I'm not going to edit those coughs out. I mean, this is real. This is mad real. And yeah, I just said mad real. But we're going for realism here at the Graphic Histories Podcast. Today's guest is actually linked to our previous guest, Frank Forrestal. This is David Cullen. David was a writer, more of an artist, who did some odd writing for Marvel back in the day. Specifically some work on kind of funny backups on What If comics and What The Comics. He did a Marvel Spotlight. Mostly now a storyboard artist who worked on some... with an impressive resume and worked on some movies that I dearly love, and we talk about that, I think, in the second part. This is another 2-part conversation as it went a bit long, and I don't like to edit them. I think it's cool to get the full thing. When I listen to other podcasts, I don't mind if they do 2-parters, 3-parters, 4-parters, whatever. I dig the show. I want to keep listening. So, yeah, well, why should I, heavily edit and take out some cool stuff from this just to appease some timeline that is arbitrary and only put in place by me? It's dumb. So, no need to do that. I'm going to just let it all go. And because I don't think he had the best of internet connections, there is a little bit of technical wings and ahs in there, which I'm just going to leave as well because it kind of would take away. I have gone through and edited a few of those that have past shows. But for this one, I don't think it's as bad as all that. It's only infrequent, and it's not very bad. So enough that I think you'll be able to figure it out and be able to still enjoy the interview for what it was. I dearly loved it. I thought Dave's a great guy, and I'm very excited to get to know him better, hopefully in real life. I had gone through some What If comics and noticed a funny backup called What If Keith Richards had founded the Fantastic Four instead of Reed Richards, and I posted a thing online about it. And Frank reached out and said, I know that guy. I play board games with him. He's a friend. So, of course, that led to me having Frank on the show first. And then Dave was busy. So then I eventually got to hook up with him and have him on for this one. And we had a great conversation. it lasted, a long time, so that's why I'm breaking it up in a couple hours. But real interesting stuff. A hell of a career. I love these stories with guys that just sort of get into Marvel by just sheer tenacity, and it sounds like he really did. Like he really threw it all out there and got a shot at the big leagues and kind of worked into a career doing storyboards and other stuff, and became a very talented artist. I've viewed some of his stuff, and it's great. But yeah, why listen to me tell you about him? Why don't you hear about it from him and tune into part 1 of my conversation with David Cullen.
I'm well. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. How about me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see you. I can hear you okay.
Oh, excellent.
Good. Should I kill this light behind me? I just noticed.
No, it's fine. It's only audio.
Is that okay?
It's only audio. I just like the talk face to face because it's easier.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Wise, but
okay.
I just use the audio, so
yeah.
No
gotcha.
worries.
Nice to meet you.
You as well.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm a little bit late.
Oh, totally all right, man. I don't mind at all. I was just wrapping up on some other work while I was waiting for you, so I was making sure I had my records right. So
sure,
cool.
Sure. I'm fine. Busy, but things are good.
Yeah. What are you working on?
I'm hitting the new year running.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
About the same. It's been I think everybody has the sort of seminal, like when it's a new year, you're like, I'm going to get this done this year, I'm going to do that this year. And I feel like it's been a long. I used to do like my own kind of comics and creative stuff like that, and it's been a while since I've got around to it because you kind of get wrapped up in making money and trying to survive.
Oh, sure.
And I've been missing it a lot, so I think this is the year that I'm going to really try to put gravel to the grindstone and get something done.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I got a number of important things done last year that I needed to do for years, just general life stuff, and I'm really happy to have it done. And I've got to keep that momentum up because I am late with stuff, so I got to keep going.
I feel like what was the episode? There's something I watched recently that really gave me the vibe of like being a commentary on. Oh, it was a Rick and Morty episode that was giving me this sort of this vibe that it was sort of a veiled commentary on like how with all the extra time we were supposed to have with like COVID, we still didn't really do anything with it. Like we had the time to fix things or to like do the projects we waited for, and no one really did. They just sort of frittered it away and then wished things went back to normal instead of actually taking the time to maybe make it better, which I thought was pretty clever. So
stuff fills up. Opportunities like that just fill up. Time opportunities, temporal opportunities, and we slow down. Everything's slowed down, so I think it threw everybody off their pace.
Yeah,
I mean, you couldn't really be efficient, at least not for a while. Not at first, I don't think. I mean, I work at home already, and my roommate at the time was used to working at a desk. He didn't always work at home, but he could do his work on computer already, and so it was a pretty easy adjustment. It was like suddenly the whole world, or at least a lot of the world, had to start functioning like stay-at-home freelancers.
And I think it sort of led us all and sort of reaffirmed a lot of beliefs that we had, that there are many jobs that don't require you to have to go to an office every day. Like if anything, it seems to me kind of insane that people do when they can do it all mostly from home. And like the amount of money spent on office spaces and all the stuff it takes to maintain an office, like the level of how many people are just doing their jobs at home just fine and not needing to trudge into an office or commute. I think it was eye-opening, and a lot of companies seem to have recognized that. Many haven't, but at least it seems like a lot of folks have been able to transition to a much more. I mean, I know I'm way more productive when I'm home and I don't have coworkers asking me questions about my weekend or my life or other things that I don't really care to talk about at work. So, it's like, I certainly would appreciate more of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I usually work at home, and every now and again I have to go to someone else's studio, particularly when it's animation and it's a longer term project. Suddenly I've got to get used to office work again. I mean, animation, working at an animation studio, it's office work. You're on a computer and you're not doing specifically just office work or administrative work. But for someone like me who works at home by hand and usually non-digitally, then I'm doing digital work in an animation studio, and I've got coworkers on either elbow, and people want to go for lunch. I always put on weight on these gigs. I get a regular paycheck for a change for a longer period of time, which is nice. And it's predictable, and it's a 9 to 6, and everything's proprietary, usually at these studios. So you can't take work home with you. If you need to work late, then you got to stay. And I don't mind that at all. I like doing late nights. And I like leaving the work at home, so I don't mind staying in an office. I think being in a kind of nearly empty office at night is kind of fun, oddly. I mean, I wouldn't want to live my whole life like that, but I didn't mind doing it. But yeah, I know what you mean. Having coworkers and the kind of like subtle social life that builds around that, even when you don't know the people.
Yeah, if you I think if you think too long about the way like the work world is structured, your head will just explode. Because you're like, if you think about the amount of time you spend with coworkers, like essentially strangers that fate just sticks you with. And if you have like a regular 40-hour a week job or whatever, you're spending 40 hours a week with these people. Like the best hours of the day, basically from 9 to 5, and more than you're probably seeing your family, like for sure. Like the people you choose to spend time with, you don't get to see as much as these work people that you kind of have to. So it's just a sort of interesting. I know social structures like that. If you sit and think about them too long, I feel like your head just sort of will explode.
And I like the people when I have those opportunities. I mean, I don't seek them out, but they're always stimulating to me because it's an unusual way to live and work for me. So it always takes me a little while to settle in. I mean, I have some nerves and anxiety. Well, not really anxiety, I guess, but at least nerves and some apprehension. If I'm going to a studio situation, adjusting to it. But I always find it stimulating, and I realize I have to dial myself back a little bit. I feel like I'm like an overstimulated pet or something that socially is maybe too wound up around people, because I'm just adjusting to it. It's like, wow, suddenly it's people, and I'm interested in to some degree in what they are doing and what they have to say, and then I wind down. I settle down after a little while, and by the end of it, I can't wait not to see them again. The last situation I was in, Copernicus, was wonderful. It was a great animation situation. We were there for 11 months. I don't care if I never work in animation again, because that was a great gig, and I really liked the people. And by the end of it, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I had a trip planned, and it's like, oh boy, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And it was a perfect situation. It was a good situation for me. But I just realized after 11 months, I'm usually a solitary animal, and I thought, okay, I'm really ready to leave this vessel. For me, going to animation is like putting out to sea or joining the army or something. It's fine, but I couldn't do it all the time. Anyway, that's me complaining. We're not. I'm not sure what I'm saying, really.
Hey, no, I like it.
The horns anytime.
No, actually, I feel like in the animation industry too, you're probably like the people that are, I'm a graphic designer, so I work for like a sign company. I have my own business, but I work for a sign company doing their sign work. So, it's not like I'm surrounded by other graphic designers, because I'm only one there. I'm just surrounded by like the installers or the woman that takes orders, or not necessarily people that, like, I feel like in animation, your coworkers are mostly probably other creative types like yourself. And I feel like that would probably drive a little more of a, I mean, my coworkers are fine. They're nice people, but it's just like, I feel like in a studio, like a place like an animation studio, you'd really get an interesting sort of mishmash of strange characters. Which is pretty cool.
I think you do. And when I was at Copernicus, they got big enough fast enough that they had a lot of people come in internationally. I couldn't I knew one or two of the guys, a couple of the guys who started that company up, and I couldn't believe how fast they were expanding. They'd already been around for quite some time at that point, I think about 10 years, but they had people from South America coming in. They had people from the UK coming in. I noticed we've lost my video. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think it's back. Yeah, there we go. No, we're good.
That up again. Okay, I see myself again. I mean, I don't mind, but yeah, I agree. Face to face is better. I could see you, but I noticed my video suddenly went
Oh, no worries.
out.
So,
Um,
are you for no?
anyway, yeah, I don't come from animation.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
no, no.
I
Well,
was, I
that's
was just going
that.
to say, for me, animation. You talked about creative compatibility. I don't come from animation, and I haven't studied it. Um, I don't have a strong affinity for it either. Comics and animation are pretty different, and live action film and animation are pretty different too, as is obvious.
Mhm.
But animation is kind of a lateral move for me. I can do it, but I'm not
Mm.
great at it. I'm
Yeah.
not a natural at it at all. And most of the people I meet in animation went to school for it, or they're trained in it, and they're much better at it than I am. So
Mm.
it's kind of a case of me playing in someone else's sandbox and learning to do what they do, basically enough to do the work effectively. I mean, I can do it, but I wouldn't be anyone's first choice for animation, I don't think, which is fine.
Well, you mentioned
Anyway,
your
I'm
type.
sorry. Before I kept rambling,
Oh
you had a
no,
question.
this is all good. For your type of animation, though, do you say you mostly stick to traditional, like you don't do it digitally?
Well, for storyboards
Oh, I see.
and for comics, I do it traditionally. If I'm working in animation, I do it digitally. Like on the last job I was working, I was doing background art. I wasn't even doing storyboards, and I was doing that. Well, actually, that was a cross between doing hand drawn work, then scanning it into a computer and touching it up digitally. It was
Mhm.
for a show called Pickle and Peanut, and they wanted a hand drawn look, which is partly how I got the job because people knew I could do that and they really needed people. So I was encouraged to try out for it, and I got it. But there was certainly a strong digital component there,
Hmm.
and I've done a bit of other digital work. So it's something I keep meaning to get further into. But I've been doing work by hand traditionally for so long that that's effective for me and is what people know me for. It produces a look of my work that people, I guess, recognize or want to keep hiring me for. So I kind of don't like to change horses in midstream. On the other hand, how much farther can I go into the 21st century and be barely digital? you
Yeah,
know,
I ran into a bit of
uh,
that. A friend of
I've been
mine,
saying for 20 years that I'm going to switch over. I'm going to switch over. It hasn't happened yet. Not quite.
a friend of mine
Figure. I
actually
don't know.
unloaded on me a drawing tablet, which I've never used before. I've always been the same traditional drawing. I would color digitally with Photoshop, but I would draw in ink and do all that stuff normally. And I just like, and I'm like, I gotta try it. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but man, like the ease of it, like to ink with it, I could not get over it. Like how much faster and like because you don't even need to scan the pages. I can just take a photo of the panels and do it that way and assemble them in. Like I was
Yeah.
kind of floored with how like I'm still haven't done it enough. What I need to do is give myself a project that I need to work on with it, so then I have to use it and then kind of learn as I go.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm the same way. I need a creative reason to do it. Just
yep.
putting myself through exercises. I mean, I did it before I went to work at Copernicus to get my Photoshop game up. I put myself through exercises to get at least competent to where I could start to learn what I needed to learn. And yeah, I do revisions. I just did a round of revisions on a job, fully aware that it would be much easier to do that digitally.
Mhm.
The first round on paper is fine, but then you're doing revisions digitally. But I don't know. I don't mind that, or maybe I'm a masochist. But
Most
once I
artists
have
are.
like, yeah, once I have a comic project, and I've got my own thing that I've been developing for years, and just started getting back to work on in earnest last year. Once I have to color that, I'm going to do the color separations digitally. I may do rough drafts by hand on photocopies like they used to, but if I want to be serious about taking that any further, and I do want to take it further, then I'll have to. That's when I'll do it. That's when I'll get my new Photoshop program, or maybe even a drawing tablet, probably, and just do separations on computer. And because when I work on this project, I'm so keen to do it. But again, these passion projects are personal projects. You shoehorn them in around your work.
Mhm.
You know how it is, right?
Yeah.
From the sounds of it,
Yeah.
and
Oh
anything
yeah.
else you've got to do. So, I'm climbing that mountain slowly. But last year, I resolved to work a little bit on my own personal stuff. If almost every weekend if I can.
Oh, very
If
cool.
not weekdays, like an hour a day or something. So that way it's always present in your mind a little bit. It's always kind of walking with you rather than just waiting for this kind of illusory big chunk of time that you think you're going to have. Like it's only finally last year that I let go of this fantasy that I was going to be like, I don't know, down with mono or laid up with a broken leg or something, or just completely unemployed for 3 to 6 months, which part of me still is prepared for that. But I haven't gone that long without work in, I don't know, probably 20 years or something. I keep thinking it's going to happen and I'll do it. I'll do my personal stuff and I'll just live on the cheap. And it's like, no, I think those years are actually finally behind me.
Yeah.
Knock wood.
That's
Anyway,
I remember I read somewhere, I think like Stephen King's like process is he gets up at like 5 a.m. and then he writes till like noon, and like no matter what he just keeps writing. He has like an hour or a page limit he hits, so if he finishes one book he just immediately starts another, like, and that's just how he works, and he's done that like his pretty much whole career. And I remember reading that going like, I mean, I think you can do that when that is your job, you have nothing else. I mean, I'm sure he has other things to do, but like, your job is writing. You don't have to go to an office or carve out time around all that. So, but I've always sort of envied that, the ability to have that, to do that. And I feel like creatively, it kind of reminds me and Frank, when I had him on the show, and I have to thank him again for making the introduction, because I'm really happy to have you on. We're talking about like, the AI art and the sort of rise of that. And we were talking about that for a little while, and then I sent him this sort of meme I saw, which was like, me 10 years ago saying, "Oh, great! I can't wait until AI takes over all the manual labor jobs so that I can focus on art." And then it's like 10 years later, and they're like, "Hey, look, we made AI that can do the art for you, so now you don't have to now you can just focus on your manual labor job." Like, so it just sort of went the other way, instead of freeing us up to do creative stuff, it just took away the need for creativity, and now we can focus on the manual garbage that nobody wants.
I've seen people online talking about that and bitching about it and various headlines and things like that. And I don't know, that'll get hammered out. I think that its early peak is going to subside, but it's going to develop and find its place in the industry or something.
It's the genie's out of the bottle. It's never going to go away. It's just it's part of life now.
Exactly.
So, I guess we can start from where are you from originally? Are you Nova Scotian from the get-go, or?
Yeah, born in Halifax.
Oh, wow.
Born in Halifax and raised in Lunenburg County.
Oh, wow.
And
I
then
love
was in
Lunenburg.
the States for a while, and then back here to go to NSCAD, and then here in Halifax working for most of the 90s, pretty much all of it.
What did you go to the States for when you were younger?
I was a kid and I went with my family. My stepdad's American and he's an oceanographer, and he was up here, I think, on some kind of work permit. I don't remember exactly the deal there, but I believe that a condition of his work time up here was that he returned to the States when he was done, during which he acquired himself a family. So we went with them. We moved to Texas.
Wow, that's quite how old were you when that happened?
I was 12, about to turn 13.
So your mom met this new guy, married him, and then you moved y'all to Texas?
Yep.
Where's your dad at in this situation?
He was from California, and we moved to Texas. My dad was here, and he was here with my stepmom, and so my mom and stepdad and my brother and I, actually 3 brothers, because they had my first stepbrother right before we moved.
Oh, wow.
So we all moved, and we had to, it got a bit complicated as family things do. When my mom married my stepdad, I decided that I wanted to change my name to my stepdad's name, and my younger brother Pete, followed along with that, and that required my dad's, if not blessing, at least legal permission. And that took a bit of negotiation, but we hammered that out to everyone's.
So as like a young teenager, you negotiate with your father to be able to change your name?
Well, in conjunction with my parents.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a series of what I recall was a long time ago now, like over 40 years ago, but we had a series of what I recall were like summit meetings where we could tell my dad wasn't thrilled by the idea. And I was fairly adamant, and my folks were supportive of that. And, there were practical reasons for doing so as well, because we were all about to move to another country. I mean, my stepdad's country, and my mom, by dint of marriage, could go with him. We could go with him as well, but it was going to make getting green cards and passports and things like that much easier. So there were logistical reasons to do it.
Seems like a lot of practical thinking for a young person to think of.
I don't know I don't know that I was thinking practically. My attitude was, my folks had been split for a few years, and my stepdad was the right guy at the right time. And my relationship with my dad was pretty good. It wasn't as good as it got later. And doing a name change like that was, and him consenting to that, because he could have put the kibosh on the whole thing. That went a long way to shoring up my relationship with my dad.
Well, I would
we
say
weren't, we weren't at great odds, but any separation and divorce, where the kids stay with the mom, or with one parent, the kids stay with one parent, and the other parent goes their own way. That's difficult. That's a huge adjustment, of course, as anyone who's been through it knows. And I was a young kid who wanted that family infrastructure. I've had lots of friends. You probably know lots of people who've gone through similar things. I think kids, as common as it is, and as very much possible as it is to be a single parent, I think kids know that or they feel safer if they know that there's two pilots in the cockpit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't have to be that way, and lots of people do a great job, a spectacular job, under no doubt adverse conditions, raising kids on their own, or with the help of a separated parent. There's no end of variations these days, but I definitely like the idea of my mom being with somebody, and particularly that, my stepdad. I mean, I liked and loved my stepdad. He was absolutely, if it had been someone else, I might not have felt as strongly, but he was absolutely the right guy at the right time. And I said, I want to be a member of this band. I'm going to take this guy's name, and he was amenable to that, and my mom was too. My dad came along. He talked with us and listened to us, and he came around to it. He saw, I think, the advantage of it, and it worked out. I mean, I'm sitting here remembering this from a long time ago, and speaking kind of vaguely on behalf of whatever they went through as adults, and I'll never entirely know that. But I guess that's my really long-winded way of saying it all worked out in the end.
Well, that
with my dad and my mom and my stepdad, and they all get along fine.
Oh,
too.
good. Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, it goes a long way, I guess, when you say about a connection with your father to realize if he's willing to, he knows it was important for you, and he would put aside his personal feelings about it because it's something you wanted. Like that goes a long way as far as establishing that. And I mean, in the end, it's just a name. You're still blood, or DNA or whatever that connects you.
Yeah. I was never trying to deny that or reject my original family or anything like that. It was I don't know that I can add anything to it that I haven't already said, but I thought, we're a unit. We're all going to move as a unit. We're sticking with mom. We've got this. We've got our stepdad in the mix, and for me, it felt like. I wouldn't have thought of it in these terms at the age of 12, but looking back, there's a definite feeling of desired solidarity, for lack of a better phrase. That was definitely my feeling. To this day, I'm not sure if I don't know that my younger brother Pete was as keen at the time, but he was also 10. So, I don't know that I'm remembering my own feelings that accurately, but I do remember wanting it and going for it and kind of initiating it, and my parents supporting it, and my dad supporting it in the end too.
Oh, excellent. Well, that solves the mystery for me. Because I was wondering, I never met any Cullens from Nova Scotia, so I was curious. Yeah, that explains why. Very cool.
There are Cullens. There are Cullens in the phone book. I know, not a lot, but there are Cullens there. I don't know if they're from Nova Scotia or not, but my stepdad's from California.
Yeah, that's so what in so he's an you say he's an oceanographer?
Yeah.
What did he have to do in Texas?
Well, they're on an ocean. They've got the Gulf.
I suppose. Yeah,
we were on the coast. I mean, Texas is mostly inland. It's a giant state, but we were right on the coast on an island just off the coast of Corpus Christi. I mean, it was a peninsula kind of. There was a causeway, but yeah, they were at
that must have been like a paradise, like in a warm like island on that side of the coast on the west coast. Like that must have been
on the east coast.
Oh, east coast. Sorry, on the east coast.
California's on the west
sorry,
coast.
Yeah, you're on the other side. Yeah,
on the Gulf Coast. Opposite. I mean, west of Florida.
Yeah, I mean that must have been on an island, like in an island off on yourself. That sounds like heaven, especially one to grow up in.
It sounds like that.
Yeah, well, it's,
we lived on an island. We had palm trees in our backyard, but we also had grass burrs in like most of the grass and poisonous snakes in the long grass. And
I guess that would be so fun. It's like Australia always is painted as this beautiful paradise, but then you're like the spiders as big as your place.
The postcards are spectacular.
Yeah,
I mean, there was nothing like. I mean, it was a subtropical climate. If you like that stuff, then I mean, half the island was beach. I'm not sure there was a day in 1984 from like late May to early September where me and my brother and our friends weren't like at the beach, slowly drifting down the beach, in the undertow. It was great. I mean, there were a lot of pluses, but it was a long way to be from home. It was a long way from Nova Scotia, and I like it here. I miss that. And you're at that age. I was 12, so you're at that age where you're making those really like strong friendships. And then suddenly you're gone, and you're the weird new kid in this small island school where everyone's grown up together and they all know each other. And here's this kid from Canada. I mean, it couldn't have been more foreign, even though we were all mostly kind of like Anglo white kids, and a handful of Mexican kids. But then the people were the best part. I mean, the people that I met and the friends I did make were wonderful, and I really missed them when I left. I don't do well in a subtropical climate, so that kind of weather I could live without.
Well, I like it. I'm also like a pale, easy to burn type of guy. I am happy to go south and sit under a palm tree and drink my face off for a week whenever you do one of those sort of trips. But I always my wife I always romanticize to her like Ernest Hemingway. I'm always like, this guy had the best life. He just lived on a beach in Cuba in a cabin, drank his face off, and wrote amazing novels. I mean, he had a bunch of cats. It seems like it's great. And then Jen's like, well, he killed himself. And
exactly. Like, he picked a hell of a way to wrap it up.
Yeah, I was like, well, it wasn't all good, I guess, but at least he had a good run.
Well, I've always been curious about the Florida Keys. Florida is one of only 3 states in the Union now to which I've never traveled or haven't at least passed through. I mean, I haven't spent a night in every state, but I've set foot in every state except Alaska and Hawaii, which I think are kind of understandable misses given their distance.
Yes. It's funny because Florida is one of the few states I have been
getting to. Well, that's the case for many Canadians. I feel like I'm one of the only, if not the only Canadian who's never been to Florida. I mean, I know I'm not the only Canadian. I'm exaggerating. But of all the states for a Canadian to miss, Florida, seems an odd one. But I've always wanted to see the Florida Keys. I think that's where Hemingway was, wasn't he? Wasn't he writing down on the Florida Keys?
Yeah.
That's what Jimmy Buffett wrote about in that song. I think he was writing about clinical depression. I wonder if that's a place for people who go who are like clinically depressed or fugitives.
Maybe a bit of both. I love the idea that all of Jimmy Buffett's songs are just masked or veiled themes of clinical depression. Like there are all these party anthems that people just romanticize and dance, all the time to. And the idea that like maybe there's more to it or it means something else entirely.
Yeah, but you follow the verses of that song and you realize he's getting closer. He's like this confessing alcoholic who's kind of like miserable, who's just wayward and drifting and casually blaming it on this, that, or the other if he thinks about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the end of it and he comes around. I'd never listened to the lyrics about it. I just thought, okay, it's about sitting on your porch. It's about living that 1 week vacation as your life. And then you think about it as an adult who has a life and any glimmer of ambition, you think, what a depressing existence.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're retired and you had enough and you're looking back, maybe that's one thing. But if you're our age or younger, I mean, Jesus, that's
yeah, I know.
That's a long vacation.
Yeah,
And
that's why that's why Hemingway's perfect, because you had the writing the books in there. The writing of the books is what makes it not as sad.
Well, exactly. He had something to do. I mean, I don't know much about Hemingway, so I don't know what he was going through to lead him to that end.
I think he was sick, or he knew he was sick. I think that's what I Ken Burns did one of his 9-hour documentaries on him that I've been meaning to watch, but I haven't got around to it.
Love Ken Burns documentaries.
Me too. I got to watch that one. That's next time.
I didn't know he did one on Hemingway. I should look at that.
Yeah. So, but I think he was ill, or he knew he had. I think maybe it was I think it was a similar situation to Robin Williams. I think it was the same condition. It was he knew it was some kind of mental thing that would break down. I don't know, it was Parkinson's or something like that. But anyway, he just ended it before it got bad. But I think that's what my understanding is. But I'll have to watch the doc and probably get a better insight. So, wow, were you was comics always a thing growing up with you? Then was that something you discovered in the mix, in the moving, or I assume you were a comic fan growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Comics came to me via TV through superheroes. It was kind of a combination of Ralph Bakshi's old Spider-Man cartoon, which appeared on probably CBC, I think.
The 60s.
Maybe
one, right?
TTV. It's the one from the late 60s.
Yep, 66, yeah.
I mean, it predated me barely. I was born in '69, but I didn't see it until, it was in kind of syndicated reruns, and it was just about the first thing I remember seeing on TV as a really little kid in the mid '70s, and we had this black and white TV, and this is pre VCRs, right? By a few years, several years, and so the show would end, and you didn't have the option of just watching it again or watching more. It came on once a week, and that was it. That was your cartoon for the week, or your block of cartoons, and then it was over. And so I wanted to preserve the experience, and I did so by just drawing it. I drew as much of the episode as I could remember as soon as it was over. I drew everything in ballpoint pen, and we had a black and white TV, so it must have been at least a year, maybe 2 years. I didn't know what color Spider-Man was. I didn't see comic books. I don't know if I even knew about comic books. My parents were not at all plugged into pop culture. Mm-hmm. I mean, for the most part, they had a few shows that they liked to watch. And as a young kid who was learning to read, and of course my parents were encouraging that, they weren't, I don't think had bought into the idea of learning to read via comics. There are books that you could read, and my mother was keener on, I think, me reading books and comics for a while. She was very supportive of my drawing, I hasten to add.
Oh, that's great.
Became very supportive of my comics work. In fact, both my folks, my mom and my dad, and stepdad and stepmom, were always quite supportive of my drawing and my artwork. They never got in my way. They didn't try to talk me into going to school for anything else. They didn't hassle me about doing any of the work. This is something that I always did. Drawing was something I always did. And
I used to say that was a rarity with some of these interviews I've had. But lately it seems like people I've talked to, they've had some of the artsy people you would expect, I mean, you get the trepidatious parents to say have a fallback or a backup plan or something. But, it actually kind of warms my heart to see so many folks that had encouraging parents when it comes to the arts, because you always assume that it's, they don't want you to do that because it's not your parents want the best for you, so they want you to make money and be a doctor or something that's going to make sure you're set for life. But the fact that they encouraged it, it just makes me happy. You don't see a lot of that in some of these conversations, but recently it seems like, I mean, I guess with Frank, it was his father was doing it already anyway. So other people that I talked to as well recently, I've just it's becoming more common of a thing to come up, and it's surprising to me, but awesome. I don't know if it's just a generational thing or because I guess most people I talk to are generally a little older than me, but it's
Yeah.
still just super cool. Especially like, I mean, when you were coming to them with wanting to do art, you would have been what, in the 80s? So early 80s?
Well, I mean, I've been drawing for as long as I can remember,
Mm.
which goes back to, the mid 70s,
Mhm.
even before comics. I used to like to draw. I guess maybe every little kid is interested to some degree in infrastructure because you're seeing is literally how the world works, and you're seeing it for the first time, the age of, well, from as soon as you can remember. So however far back that is, age 2, 3, or 4, whatever.
Mhm.
So I used to draw pictures like just kind of flat floor plan pictures of roads and stop signs and railroad tracks. I liked that a lot. And then I saw this Spider-Man cartoon, and I thought, okay, now I want to draw that. So I just drew that, and I colored Spider-Man green because I didn't know he was red or blue. And then I had neighbors. Eventually, I had neighbors and friends who did have comics, whose parents bought them comics, and my parents didn't do that. They let me buy my own comics when I was ready, but then that's where you learn what allowance is all about and how to save money for what you want. So yeah, then a neighbor up the road had, I don't know if you've ever seen this, the Marvel and DC Treasury Edition Superman versus Spider-Man.
Oh
It's
yes,
fantastic. Big tabloid size comics.
yeah.
That
I
was
have
first
the
comic book I
small
ever saw.
representation of it, but I was one of the early comics I got too. They put them in those little mini like Archie size books. And I think I
They
have
put
that one.
that in an Archie size book,
Is,
really?
is that the one with Cat? Who are the villains in it? Because they did a couple of those, I think. But
They did, but this was the first one. I think the
is it
villains.
is it the one where Spider-Man's like on the thing and Superman's coming in from the side? It's like
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah.
the one I have.
Spider-Man's
Yeah,
on. Yeah,
yeah,
he's on top of the Empire State Building, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. That's the one I have. I can't remember where it must have been something that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, but I found it in a shop somewhere and picked it up. So
A digest size of a tabloid size.
yeah, I know
That's
it's a weird.
That's amazing.
I think it's black and white too, so it's whatever they did at that point.
Wow, interesting. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, the tabloid size, the original one. That was the first comic I ever saw. And the first comic book I ever owned, which my mom did buy for me, if I recall correctly, was Super Friends #1.
Oh wow.
Remember Super Friends?
Yeah, I do.
Although I don't recall ever seeing them on TV. They were on some station that we didn't get. We didn't have cable for the longest time, not until we were in Texas. Anyway, yeah, comics. So I saw comics and I thought, okay, telling a story with pictures, this is a good way to go. I like superheroes and costumes, and all for the same reasons that I think kids like that stuff, or are attracted to that, when we're young kids. So that's what I drew. That's what got me drawing comics, was I want to duplicate this comic experience that I'd had that began with the TV experience. And I just kept doing that, and I didn't find anything that I liked better. So I decided I wanted to do that right the way through. And once I got out of high school, I didn't know where to go to continue that. So I thought, well, at this point we were in Maine, having moved from Texas. And I thought, okay, it's time to look around for schools. And I looked at the Portland School of Art in Maine, and they wanted a lot more money for a year than my folks were prepared to outlay, I think. Although I think they would have done it anyway if I really settled into it. Or actually, I don't know, I'm checking myself on this now, because I didn't push hard for it. It seemed an obvious option, Portland School of Art, because I was in Maine. And I just remember, money was a significant factor. And I was the first one to leave home, being the oldest. So NSCAD was, I guess, a pretty present option, given that I'm from Nova Scotia. We were a lot closer to Nova Scotia in Maine than we were in Texas. So I came home. I came home for NSCAD, and was really just buying myself time until I could figure out what I wanted to do at art school, or how I was getting into comics, or if I really still wanted to do comics, which I was pretty sure I did. But you leave high school and you go off to school with your head full of ideas and questions, and you don't know what's going to pan out.
So what year would this have been when you went to NSCAD?
When I went to NSCAD, early '89. I graduated high school in '88, applied to NSCAD, didn't get in the first time, pushed a little harder and got in the second time.
Oh wow.
And started in early '89. And I was
What
there
was
in
the reasoning
89.
for the dismissal the first time? Is it just your portfolio wasn't broad enough, or?
Well, I think so. But well, I don't know if I talked to the dean or the assistant dean, but I thought, okay, I'm going to have to push harder to get in the second time. And I talked to somebody at NSCAD, dean of admissions probably. And then I came up here. I was still living in the States. Spring of my senior year, I came up here in the spring of '88 for a visit and to see them in person. And basically my folks were very supportive of this too, and probably coached me somewhat. They said, okay, this is what you want to do. You're going to have to try harder, and you're going to have to really prove it to them. And so I did. I came up and met them in person, and I don't remember really talking with anybody. It's a bit vague now. Maybe I delivered the portfolio in person the first time, and because I remember coming up in, I think, April, and then coming up again in July of the same year. And I think I came up in July. Right, I got rejected in June because I remember getting fired from a job that same month. And this is all the same month I was graduating high school. It's like, hey, guess what? The real world isn't ready for you yet, or you're not ready.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You're graduating high school anyway, so start swimming.
Yeah.
I came back up in July, and that's when I came back to them again and said, hey, what gives? What happened? And more or less the reason that I remember that they dismissed me was they didn't like the sound of my statement. You had to write a statement, like a one-page artist's statement of what you wanted to do and why you wanted to come to NSCAD. And I was honest with them. So I told a fine art school that I wanted to draw comics. And in the late 80s at NSCAD, that was not on. And understandably so. They were positioned as a fine arts school primarily, if not only. And they were conceptual and experimental. And they weren't terribly interested in pop culture.
Which is a shame because
they were nice about it. I mean, nobody was snotty about it, but they said, listen, you'll be a cat in a doghouse or vice versa. It won't work.
It's kind of interesting that they are such a progressive sort of like being on the cusp of like art and how dismissive. I mean, I think nowadays it certainly seems like a more elevated medium, but back then it was just dismissed as bubblegum pop culture's garbage.
Sure.
But this is even on the cusp of other books like, I don't know, Arkham Asylum or Dark Knight Returns or these other things that are sort of bringing the attention to better storytelling in the comics world. In art books as well.
NSCAD was, NSCAD was not being run and attended by young people.
No.
It was the baby boomer generation's institution to a large extent. Not entirely. There were some younger teachers there, but the people who'd come in the late 60s and 70s were still there in the late 80s. For the most part. So there weren't people there keeping up with what was happening in comics or graphic novels.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. I mean, there's so much to keep up with in the fine art world.
Yeah.
Why would you go looking for this whole other, why would you look at this whole other medium when there's so much to study and follow and so much on offer in the world of fine art? I mean, NSCAD had an international reputation, probably still do. They had visiting artists come in. They had an exchange program with Cooper Union in New York. I mean, NSCAD didn't need comics.
Yeah.
They'd only recently at that point, I may be getting my history screwed up because I don't know it that well, but they had a design program which had a very good reputation, but not many people in it. It wasn't talked about. It didn't seem to be something that was promoted by the school at that time. Again, maybe I'm wrong. That's how it seemed to me. I mean, it
would make sense.
I had bias. I certainly had my biases. I was essentially an imposter at fine art school. I didn't know what I was doing there, but I made the best of it with what I could. And one of the things that made it really attractive to me once I got there, I didn't know this beforehand, was that they had a loft space in Lower Manhattan in New York City. And within the first couple of weeks that I was there of my first year in early '89, I saw a notice on the wall in the stairwell encouraging people or reminding students of the drawing class that was going to New York from NSCAD to get your money in and get your airline tickets delivered to the teacher or whatever was going on, however that was being done, sign up or whatever it was. And I didn't know about this, and it turned out to be a drawing class at NSCAD that was going to New York for a week in March of that year, and it wasn't one of my drawing classes. I wasn't in it, but I just met a comic book artist named John Bogdanoff who lived quite near me in Maine. We just struck up a phone conversation, which my mother put me on to. She'd met up with him earlier that summer at a craft fair and noticed him drawing comics and said, "Oh, well, my teenage son draws comics. Could I have him contact you or something?" And John's he's become one of my very best friends, and he's a lovely guy. And said, I don't know what he said to her, but the point is, I guess he encouraged my mom to say something to me about it, and she did. And I'd never heard of him at that point. He was drawing a comic called Power Pack. This was pre going to Marvel for X Factor, and certainly, well, no, he was already at Marvel.
Power Pack was a Marvel comic, yeah.
Right. But it was before his stock went up when he moved to the X-Men to X Factor. Although he only lasted a few issues, because then Mike Carlin at DC got him for Superman, Man of Steel, and that's where he really got known. But this was all before that, right before he moved to X Factor, and so I hadn't heard of him, and I forgot about it. Somehow, while I was in the middle of, I don't know, I guess I was trying to finish high school, and I'd just been fired from a crappy job, and I hadn't got into NSCAD, and I was working on that. And my mother, who used to make stuffed animals and sell them at local craft fairs, had just come back from this thing and said, "Hey, I met a comic artist, in up the road in the next town or the next county," and he. Maybe she didn't say he worked for Marvel. I don't know. But somehow I went, "Oh, okay, that's interesting," and then forgot about it. And then months later, while I was preparing to go to school, to move back here to go to NSCAD, I was going through my comic book collection, and I discovered his name on the Fantastic Four versus X-Men miniseries.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because I was a big X-Men fan and Fantastic Four fan at that time when that came out. When that series came out in like 86, 87. And, John writes his name large across the bottom of his drawings. And Bogdanoff is an unusual enough name that I noticed it when I saw it on the cover. I hadn't made the connection between this person that my mother had met in like mid 88 and the guy who had drawn this series a year and a half, 2 years earlier. I hadn't heard of him before, and I'd kind of forgotten his name. So I saw that in my comics and I went, wait a minute, this name looks familiar. This is the guy Mom was talking about. Suddenly, pow, wow, it can't be. What, really? I bought comics from a guy who lives like half an hour drive from here. Then I got interested and I looked up his number and called him up, and he was very helpful and encouraging. And then a month later, I'm back living it here in Halifax. I'm at NSCAD, and suddenly there's a drawing class is going to go to New York. So everything seemed very kind of synchronous. Went, okay, I was just talking to a Marvel Comics artist who lives in Maine, but sends word to New York. And he was telling me about what to do when you're in New York and how to put together sample pages. And all of this stuff started fusing at once. And so I went and did job interviews at Marvel in DC.
How did that go?
With the help of John's advice. Well, I had two, for starters, from the point of view of a 19-year-old who had just started art school and did all right in high school, but really had little else to offer the world. I'd done nothing. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't known for anything because, what are you known for when you're 19? So from my point of view, it went great. I got no work. I got nowhere. But the fact that I knew a comic book artist and I had a way to get to New York, with an art school group. So I wasn't just going to go by myself. I probably wouldn't have had the guts to do it. I wouldn't have, that's not something I would have maybe even thought to do by myself. I might have eventually, but who knows? It just suddenly seemed like, the neon arrows were kind of all pointing in the same direction. They were flashing in my face. It's like, hey, stupid. This is what they meant by
this
growing
is the
up.
Opportunity.
Recognize opportunities, find a way to make them happen, figure it out, ask older people, ask someone who's done it or knows. And I was very lucky to have not just the support of my parents, but a guy like John Bogdanov to say, oh, wow. Like I'd talked to him before I knew about this, before I'd even left home and gone to NSCAD. It was like the month before I left home. And then about 1 month, maybe 6 weeks later, I'm now living in Halifax, going to NSCAD. I've left Maine. I've left my family back in Maine. And suddenly this opportunity comes up. And it's like, wow, I could do this. And I know just the guy to call to ask.
John seen your work? Had you like shown him your stuff?
No, he hadn't seen any of my work at that point. We had one phone conversation where we kind of like traded, life stories, or mainly he told me about it himself, and I introduced myself, of course, but he had more to say than I did, I think. Understandably, I mean, he was like a guy in his 30s with a wife and a kid and a house and a career, a real adult. I was 19 talking to a real adult who was doing what I wanted to do. But he hadn't seen my work, so I called him up when I got. I don't remember how this went down actually, because I arranged to go on the trip, and I think I might have booked some job interviews myself. I don't remember if I did the samples before I booked the interviews or not, but I think I sent John my samples, and in fact, I'm pretty sure I did. I don't remember what he said about them, but he did tell me what kind of thing to prepare for samples. He said, if you want to draw, if you want to do penciling, work on 11 by 17 artboard and just do the drawings. Don't ink them. Don't write a story. Don't have lettering on them. Just pictures, no words. Show a sequence of events. Do several pages or a few pages. And I did like 3 or 4 pages each of 4 different characters, and I got 4 interviews, 2 at DC, 2 at Marvel. I didn't get work. In short, my work was terrible, but the general consensus among the people I spoke to was that your draftsmanship needs a lot of work, your perspective is wonky in places, you really need to do life drawing and learn anatomy, which I hadn't done. I'd done very little life drawing because I'd spent kind of ruined myself in a way, partly by just drawing superheroes all the time and drawing comics. But so I had to kind of start from scratch in terms of a lot of drawing skill. But just through constant repetition, I had built up certain skills. I mean, my drawing did improve as I went along as an adolescent, but I had no idea at that point how much farther I still had to go until I went and introduced myself to the big leagues. But the positive note on that I got from everybody was your storytelling is pretty good. The drawing stuff you need to work on, but you can learn that. You can work on that. Your storytelling is pretty good. We can understand what's happening from panel to panel, page to page. Pretty clear storytelling. So you've got a shot at this if you work at it. And that was very encouraging.
Yeah, that's lovely. So
the short answer is, although I didn't get work, the short answer after the long answer is, for me, it went well. It felt like a great triumph. Oh, and the other thing I forgot is I didn't tell my folks about this. I didn't tell them what I was doing. I did tell them I was going to New York, and I was spending their money to do it because they'd given me a certain amount of money to help out. Although I'd been working, because I didn't get into NSCAD the first time, I stayed at home for an extra 6 months or something, and I just worked. And so I'd saved up a fair bit, like more than I'd ever saved up for like an 18 and 19-year-old. And I was able to pay for a lot of stuff on my own, but I really didn't have money set aside for a trip to New York City for a week. But I just spent the money and went for it. And then, like, that was first week of March, I think, of '89. And then I was going to go back home to Maine after my first semester at NSCAD, which was wrapping up like mid-April. So I had about a month and a half to just starve. I'd spent my money. And I remember I budgeted my money very carefully so I didn't have to ask my mom for money, because I didn't want to be that kid. I didn't want to be that college kid. I wanted to be the guy who didn't have to hit up his parents for money. Which, looking back, is just insane hubris, I suppose, especially given that I was spending money that I hadn't planned to spend. So I worked it out. because I had to get myself, I had to get myself back to Maine, and I was going to do that on my own nickel. And I would have only had about a nickel to do that. I remember working it out and realizing that, I don't know, after I paid my rent, I had like $60 to live for a month. I mean, I rationed food because my folks knew that I'd gone to New York, and they were good about it. You know, they didn't say you can't afford that. They didn't. I just said, hey, I'm going with a school trip, but I didn't tell them that I was doing job interviews because I didn't know how that was going to turn out. And I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to surprise them with something cool, whatever the outcome. I was so blown away that I managed to just cold call Marvel Comics editors and get like 4 out of a couple dozen people to say, yeah, what the hell.
You remember who you met? Was it anybody of merit, like within Marvel? Like any of the
Yeah, I remember exactly who I met. The 2 people I saw at Marvel were Bobby Chase, who was the editor of the Hulk comics and I think the Conan comics at the time. And who else did I see? Oh, and the other guy I saw at Marvel was Don Daly, who was the editor of the Punisher comics.
Oh, wow.
In fact, he was the first guy who I think agreed to an interview on the phone. Well, not a phone interview. He was the first guy who I called who said, yeah, I'll give you an interview. Because I just called up and I just kind of had like my little spiel. Hi, my name is Dave Cullen, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to be in New York at this time. And I want to draw comics and can I get it? Whatever I said. And most people, you know, if they answered their phone, said, no, we don't do that. Or sorry. And it's like, no, sorry, I don't have time. Or, but Don Daly, I remember nearly said no. And then he said, where did you say you're calling from again? And I said, I'm calling from Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's just east of Maine. And he said, yeah, I know where it is. He goes, I've been there. He goes, my grandmother's from there. That's what he told me anyway.
Wow.
Don Daly. And so he said, yeah, okay, I'll see you. And it was like, you know, come in Tuesday at 3. I'll give you 10 minutes or something. And he was great.
Oh, wow.
He was
incredibly generous with their time. That's amazing.
He did something that I don't think any other editor did. And I remember other editors were critical of him. He was kind of he's kind of a personality guy. He had a bit of shuck and jive about him, so to speak. So he didn't seem to be everybody's favorite guy, but he was great for me. He was really great with me. And what he used to do, I'd go in with 11 by 17 photocopies of my work, and he would get out a red pen, and he'd go through my stuff, and he'd put a plus by everything he liked, like right on the paper, and a minus by everything he didn't like, which was wonderful, especially as time went on, because I'd see these people again. I'd go back each year. I did that for several years. And you know, you're on the plane and your head is full of stuff and you're trying to remember what these people have said to you. And I had these pages. I could just look at pages. It was like a teacher's grading. And I went, oh, yeah, he really likes that I tried this angle. He doesn't like the way I positioned these figures. He likes this. He doesn't like that. And then you're trying to remember what the other people had said. And some people were very specific and took their time, and other people just gave you very general comments. The 2 people I saw at DC were Mike Carlin, who was also great.
Yeah.
And this was when, I mean, he was editor of the Superman comics by then, but the whole Death of Superman thing hadn't broken yet. So the Superman comics in 89, 1990 were not really a big deal at that point.
No.
I mean, it was like, you know, legacy stuff, and they kind of like maintained the legacy, but those books were not hot sellers, was my understanding.
Yeah, I guess that probably would have been that period between when John Byrne had sort of brought back, you know, everything after the crisis with Man of Steel, and then they had that little edge between in that, and then getting back up to speed for Doomsday and all that stuff. Yeah.
It was a few years, and there was some really nice work coming out of the Superman office too. I mean, Jerry Ordway was doing really nice stuff. I think
love his work
on Action. I don't think Tom Grummett was there. Cary Gamble was drawing Superman. In fact, at that first meeting with Mike Carlin, he gave me some photocopies, 11 by 17 photocopies of Cary Gamble's raw pencils. I'd never seen raw pencils before, like uninked, uncolored pencils, photocopies of pencils. And I just sat there looking at them going, wow, this stuff is really good. And he said, yeah, well, that's why I'm not giving you work today. You know, this is the standard we expect. Look at this, learn your anatomy. You got to learn this stuff, do some more backgrounds, you know, get used to using reference, which I wasn't accustomed to. And he also said, you know, your storytelling is not bad. you could do this if your drawing gets better.
Mm.
So he was good. And the fourth person who I haven't mentioned yet was Robert Greenberger. And I don't remember what comics he was editing at the time. It might have been like Legion, or I don't know that he had that many. I remember he was listed as DC's controller for a while, or traffic controller or something. And I think he was some kind of editorial coordinator for a long time. And he was very nice. He was very pleasant. Same general comments. It's like, well, your drawing's really rough, but hey, you're real young. You've got time. Keep working at it. Your storyboard or your storytelling is not bad. So that's what I did. So I found it incredibly encouraging. I mean, I hadn't expected to get that far, and to get, to be a teenage comics nerd. It's like walking in the halls of Mount Olympus or something. Yeah, I mean, I was led through the Marvel bullpen bulletin. It was very exciting.
That is pretty. I think it was Ron, and he had taught Ron Sutton, and I believe he had talked to me about how he just dropped into the Marvel Studios one day when he was young, like a kid in like the 60s, and met with like some pretty impressive people. The idea you could just drop in and like meet these folks and get involved with them is pretty astounding to me.
I mean, I haven't approached those guys in many years. I haven't approached Marvel or DC in many years. I can't imagine people just kind of taking you off the street from a cold call. Or I don't know, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't done that commonly then, but I think things changed a lot in the 90s when things kind of retracted, and then everybody the companies got bought by bigger media companies. Yeah. It became a little bit more of a corporate office culture.
And I'm going to leave it there. That'll be part 1 of my conversation with David Cullen. Great talk, great chat. Looking forward to tuning into part 2 in a couple weeks' time when that drops. And at that point, we get the rest of the story and getting all of David's sort of history and getting the full picture. So you have to wait 2 weeks for that. Hopefully you're not too far on the edge of the seat. You're not too eager. You can enjoy your life a little bit in the meantime. Believe me, I'd love to do this weekly. Predominantly, it would mean I need more guests. And not a life outside of this. I would love to be able to do this all the time, but this is the life of the modern podcaster. It's a side hustle, and not one you really do for money. More for the love of the game, as they say. And I really do. I really enjoy talking to creatives about their process and how they get to where they go, and it also kind of inspires me a lot more as well. So. Another recommendation that I don't know if I do this a lot in the other podcast, but on this one I don't. You should check out Kaiju Max by Xander Cannon. If you're not reading it, pick it up. I've been collecting it for years, but have only read the first few volumes, and I'm finally getting around to reading the rest. I actually was missing some volumes. I'm not sure if I misplaced them or if I didn't get them from the comic store and just didn't realize. But anyway, I ended up looking into, and I know it's sacrilege, Comixology, the digital comics platform through Amazon. And they have a Kindle Unlimited for $9.99 a month that lets you get a ton of graphic novels for free. Well, not free, but part of that service. It's like Netflix for books. So because of that, I just managed to grab the deluxe editions on there and have started reading them. And they're great because they have little annotations at the bottom from the creator, the artist and writer, Xander Cannon, about what this means, that means, where you got inspiration for this and that. It's kind of neat. It's very cool. But it's a beautiful story. It's basically a prison comic about kaiju. It's a giant monster prison where they go after they're caught by, Ultra Force or whatever. And it's kind of like Oz, but with kaiju. So that's my elevator pitch. But it's a great book. If you're not reading it, definitely check it out. It's fantastic. But anyway, I guess I should go. I got to get ready for my other podcast. Just trying to squeeze this in before that one starts. I got a busy week. So, here it is. Make sure to tune in 2 weeks' time for the second part of my conversation with David Cullen. And in the meantime, stay safe, read comics, and don't do anything I wouldn't do, which means you're pretty wide open. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.